Hard work. Stop recording.
Hello and welcome to the history of the Metacrisis. Today I have the great pleasure, honor, and really a privilege of hosting a world-recognized business leader with a great passion for sustainability, for which he is ready to go to extremes, literally and literary. In a sense, he is a bit crazy or genius, which in most cases are one and the same, for language often lacks the breadth and width and depth of really describing brilliant people like him. For me, and for millions of people around the globe, he is both a madman and an inspiration, the latter deriving from the former. So, who am I talking about? His name is Hakan Bulgurlu, and he is a second-generation Turkish citizen with Greek origins, I just heard, born in Norway. He is actually a citizen of the world. He is a business executive renowned for his leadership as the CEO of BEKO, a leading global corporation in the consumer electronics industry, which owns several brands, including Grundig and Hitachi. Hakan holds a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of Texas, Austin, an MBA from the Kellogg-Kowloon University of Hong Kong. Since January 2023, he serves as a member of the executive committee of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, an organization that brings together transformational organizations to form a global community that shifts the systems they work within towards a better future. With over 2 decades of experience in various managerial roles, Hakan has demonstrated exceptional prowess in driving change and innovation, leading to success. Before joining BEKO, former Acerlic, he served in executive positions at prominent world-leading companies, where he spearheaded strategic initiatives that propelled business expansion and market dominance. Under Hakan's guidance, BEKO has witnessed remarkable advancement and achievements. He has led the company in embracing sustainability-driven practices, prioritizing environmental responsibility and ethical business conduct. Through his visionary leadership, BEKO has implemented initiatives aimed at reducing carbon footprint, promoting eco-friendly manufacturing processes, and fostering a culture of corporate social responsibility. Bulgurlu's contributions to the industry have earned him numerous accolades and awards, highlighting his commitment to excellence and innovation. His company, under his leadership, has been honored with prestigious recognition for its sustainability efforts and contributions to the community. Beyond his professional endeavors, Hakan is also known for his dedication to family and for his community involvement. He balances his demanding career with a commitment to family life and to heroic athletic endeavors, embodying values of integrity, compassion, leadership, and team play both within and outside the boardroom. Further, Hakan is also an author. His book title is A Mountain to Climb. In A Mountain to Climb, Hakan shares his adventures of reaching the summit of Mount Everest, an extraordinary achievement per se. The book is a gripping account of his journey, describing the challenges he faced in reaching the summit and the challenges we all face in protecting the planet and the future of humanity and of the biosystem. Hakan's quest to climb Everest came with a purpose: to make the environment the center of our ambition, to highlight the catastrophic effect of climate change, to lead by example, and to seek out practical solutions. He wanted to use the expedition as a wake-up call to what we are doing to the natural world. More than that, Hakan just came back from his South Pole expedition. Visiting Antarctica, he climbed Mount Vinson and skied his way down with a ski the last degree to the South Pole team. The reasons and targets behind this trip, similar to his Everest climbing, were to raise awareness about the impact of climate change. He was inspired to undertake the Everest ascent when he found out that scientists were predicting that the Himalayas could lose 2/3 of its glaciers by 2100 if global warming continued unabated. His South Pole trip was another effort to draw attention to the urgent need for action against climate change before West Antarctica collapses and East Antarctica vanishes to a consequential degree. Closing, let me just read a few sentences from his fellow climber and skier to Antarctica, Art Muir. Hakan joined us for the ski the last degree to the South Pole after climbing Vinson. One thing you may not realize is that Vinson includes 3,000 meters of pretty steep fixed rope climbing. We had great weather and managed to round trip it from Vinson Base Camp to the top and back in only 4 days. Others were not so lucky with the weather. So, without further ado, please welcome with me Hakan Bulgurlu, the Sustainability CEO. Hakan, welcome to the civilization, and a huge thank you for being at the History of the Metacrisis. So we discuss your adventures, ideas, visions, fears, and hopes. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Alexandros. What an introduction. I'm honored, and I'm very happy to share my experiences and also my thoughts on the path that we're on as humanity. So thank you for actually giving me the space and time to do that.
Thank you for being here. You have such an interesting life. You are an inspiration. What was your life journey? What were the pushes? How did you become you?
I mean, a very early age, I was interested in the environment. And I think growing up in the outdoors, my mother being an archaeologist and a linguist, I grew up with the stories of the history of humanity, visiting ruins and really trying to understand the past, where we came from, which you have to know if you're going to try and predict where we're going. And I also had the good fortune to be connected to business through my father. And he raised me as a more street smart, practical, execution-driven person. The combination of the two made me very curious to explore the world. I very early on, after my studies, moved to Asia, where economic growth actually was in overdrive, and China became the engine of the world. I was there in very early days, so I experienced that surge in trade and globalization. And later on, I continued my journey as a senior leader in several companies that were industrial in nature, that used a lot of materials, electricity, water, to produce goods which actually also continued to pollute and demand resources in their lifetime. And I think I became curious about what we were doing to the environment at a time which was very critical in my leadership journey. I became acutely aware of the damage we were doing on a trip to Thailand with my children and this is in the book also, A Mountain to Climb, where something I had experienced in my years of Asia, the beautiful, pristine beaches, where I wanted to show my children were in knee-deep plastic. And of course, the amount of plastic we've been dumping into the sea has been accelerating so fast that this was enough to turn basically the most pristine part of the world into a junkyard. And I couldn't explain to my children why that was the case. It was a real moment for me where I knew I had to do something to change that, or I needed to do whatever in my power I could with the platform that I was leading, because today, for example, then we were a lot smaller, but today we manufacture 42 million appliances. And that's a lot of plastic, it's a lot of electricity, water used, and it really can make a difference. So managing a scale platform also brings a unique responsibility with it. And I decided that moment that in 20 years, when I'm retired, no longer working, I'll be able to look my children in the eyes and say, I did everything I could, everything within my power to stop this from happening. And of course, the plastic was what triggered it. But then, we were all aware of what was happening with the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and the effects that warming was having. And but we weren't really all taking any urgency or action out of it. We were all just watching from afar, thinking it's future generations' problems. And as I began to understand the breadth and the depth of the problem and what the consequences of inaction were, I became desperate to both raise awareness and spur businesses and governments into action to really try and give a better future to my children. I mean, that's what lies underneath all of this. My life has been a life, as you said, of experiences, right? My challenge was to try and live 3 lives in 1 life, become a master at time management and efficiency. That was my concern. But for my children, the future may be one where they have no shelter security, no food security. It's a completely different life, no mobility, perhaps. So when you think about these shifts in lifestyle which are coming, you immediately have to take action.
And they are coming fast. The time scales are so short right now.
Yeah. Unfortunately, what we used to think about is one of the biggest problems I had with the way scientists describe it is, 2100, 2050. These are all abstract dates that don't really mean anything. It's just a picture. What's happening is happening right now, and the change is happening far worse than had been predicted in the past. And of course, this is a self-feeding loop, right? So the worse it gets, the faster it accelerates, and the more urgent action becomes. I think now the part about awareness is pretty much over. Everybody knows what's happening. The deniers, I think, have left the table. We know that this is human-induced, and we know that we are the only ones that can stop this. So I'm a believer in hope and humanity. We're very short-termists, and there's something in our nature that prevents us from taking action if something is very far in the future.
Exactly.
However,
the future is not a stimulus. The problem is our biology.
Yes.
We respond to stimulus.
We respond
the
to
future
stimulus.
is not a stimulus, it's just information.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the stimulus, positive or negative also, So
Yes.
The negative stimulus is coming very strongly now, more and more. And I think this is spurring people into action. Are we doing what's necessary? Not really, but I think businesses are taking it more seriously. Individuals, at least educated, concerned individuals, are changing their consumption habits. People are more aware of what the impact of their lifestyle is having. But is it enough? Of course not. I mean, we're far away from being able to turn around the damage we're doing. I do hold a lot of hope for technology. I'm an optimist when it comes to predicting how technology will help us. I do believe that big part of the solution is yet to come, and it will accelerate the solution also. However, the damage done is the damage done, right? The lost species are not coming back. The acidified ocean, the rising sea levels will not go back. The melting ice won't freeze again. So now, unfortunately, we're forced to talk about adaptation, and the world needs to adapt to this. And how does the world adapt to this? How does the world feed itself? When people don't have enough food to grow or water, they are going to move. How does the world cope with mass migration? I believe, and I speak about this being the largest migration humanity has ever seen, has actually started. And we're going to see this accelerate so much that borders will be militarized, moving around will be difficult. I don't want to paint a terrible picture, but we need to be realists.
But the picture is terrible.
Yeah, the picture is terrible. We need to be realists. We need to be realists so that we can then build and talk about the solution and what we need to do.
10 years ago, we have published a survey with our former ambassador in the United States, Alexandros. We've done a research about the climate refugees coming till the years 2050, and the estimation 10 years ago was about 1.5 billion. Right now, we're talking about 3 to 4 billions. So the time scales are really pressing right now. And you are doing your best, I have seen, to bring the message to the world. So for me, I have seen some criticism in the press about your expeditions that this is a publicity stunt. I think that you really mean what you are saying, and you are actually doing what you are saying. So let me just pose a question. How was Antarctica?
Antarctica was very, very cold, and it was an extended period of time. Physically, mentally, the most challenging thing I have ever done.
More than Everest?
More than Everest, because it's sustained, extreme effort. And you need the mental agility to not go crazy, because imagine you're on a frozen ocean, which is the same every day, and you're skiing 8 hours a day, which is a lot of time to think. You're thinking, even though I organize my thinking, it's very difficult to stay focused and not go down these negative rabbit holes. You're constantly questioning what you're doing there, and it feels like you're on a different planet. So it takes an immense amount of mental strength to be able to continue and sustain the effort needed to actually complete the journey. I mean, for me, this was a little minuscule taste of what I call it the age of heroes, in the 1910s, 20s, what they did. Men like Scott, Amundsen, what they endured for months on end is something that we can't even think about today. And this also tells us that, we use much less of our mental and physical capacity in our lives than we actually can. And I think part of the problem is this: we don't exert ourselves. We're too comfortable. And I really believe that growth, personal growth, comes from discomfort, comes from vulnerability. And there were many...
I totally agree. I cannot agree with you more.
Yeah, and this was a time where I pushed myself into that situation where I was vulnerable, I was weak, mentally and physically, and I think I grew from that. And I took away a very long to-do list. And you mentioned it briefly, but the reason I was there was simply to talk to scientists and to see for myself, because I believe, I've done a lot about decarbonization, right? The company I manage, it leads the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. We are ranked by many NGOs, independent, at the highest ranking possible. We lead the industry, clearly. But not only that, I believe we lead any industry because we take the opportunity to decarbonize across the board, right? So I think that's the number one priority. And the problem I have...
You have your own carbon budget, I have seen.
Yeah, we have a carbon budget. We price it internally. We look at every investment and the impact it has on our carbon balance sheet. I don't believe in buying carbon credits. I believe in creating them. So I'll give you an example, a simple example. We've invested in 105 megawatts of solar power. We're not a utility. That's a utility's job. We make washing machines, refrigerators, but we took capital away from those, our core business to invest in creating our own power. And 105 megawatts is utility scale, by the way. So every rooftop of every factory, more than 40 of them around the world, now creates its own solar panel, creates its own solar power, which then mitigates our carbon exposure, right? So I do this because I think it's also a good business sense, by the way. In 5 years, the way we're going, actually hedging your carbon exposure is going to be mandatory. You will have to offset the carbon, meaning if you don't decarbonize today, the cost of a ton is maybe 80, 90 euros. In 5 years, it could be 2,000, 3,000. It will put you out of business, essentially, and it will be mandatory. Today, it's not. So it also makes good business sense. And this is important to keep the shareholders very happy. But when it comes to the biggest risk, decarbonizing is what I've always focused on. I realized that the volume of ice melting in the Greenland ice sheet and Antarctica is the biggest danger, because even without those ice sheets in the calculation, the IPCC says, roughly their median scenario says 80, 90 centimeters sea level rise by 2100.
I have seen a research last month about West Antarctica. If West Antarctica collapses, it's about 7 meters.
Well, there's many ways to look at it. Part of this problem is that there are many ways to look at it. So the IPCC report, which is what everybody quotes, 2,000 scientists peer-reviewed, unfortunately, there's a little asterisk. It says 80, 90 centimeters by 2100, but it doesn't include Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets because there's no peer-approved review and it's not scientifically provable, right? So what they do, they ignore 90% of the ice in the world, and they say 10% of the ice melting and thermal expansion of the oceans will raise it by 90 centimeters.
I'm going to send
Now,
you some important papers later.
Thank you. I mean, I'm an engineer, and I look at basically data. 140 years to 1990, sea levels rose 10 centimeters. 1990 to 2020, roughly another 10 centimeters. So 140 years, then 30 years. My conclusion, talking to all the scientists, reading every book there is on the topic, and going there and seeing it myself, is that in the next 30 years, we're looking at 50 centimeters. And 50 centimeters, by the way, is catastrophic. 1/3 of the population lives within 100 kilometers of the coastline. You're looking at most cities inundated and lost, a global trade system disrupted. So,
and not only that, if Greenland collapses, amok is going to stop.
Yes, well, okay, that's a different topic. So, what the 50 centimeters is without the ice shelves collapsing. Now, another thing we know is that from ice core drills, for example, is that something like this happened 12,800 years ago. There were multiple events where over 10, 15 years, temperatures rose 5-6 degrees and the ice shelves collapsed, raising sea levels by between 10 and 20 meters. And that, of course, is the stories you hear in all religious books, right? Noah's Ark, the Muslims have the same, basically, Indians have the same, all religious traditions.
Also the Greeks have
also
the
the
same.
Greeks. I mean, the pre-Hellenic Greeks have it too. So, I mean, this oral tradition came down because you can imagine the catastrophe of 10 to 20 meters because everything was on the coast then. And humanity survived and remembered this. But unfortunately, we didn't remember it well enough to actually try prevent it in time. So now what we have started is something that we can't stop. This is the difference between what I was doing earlier, trying to decarbonize the business, speak about decarbonizing, and speed it up. And I'll briefly make a parenthesis. For example, ESG is what everybody talks about, and everyone's scared to speak out against ESG. I think ESG takes away very valuable resources from decarbonizing and spreads it around things which don't matter. Because if we don't decarbonize, none of those things are going to matter. What I mean by that is, you know, the number of women in management. I'm very much for that, but we need to prioritize on decarbonizing first and foremost. Now, when it comes to sea level rise, if the Antarctic sea shelves collapse, West Antarctic, only 2 of them collapse. You take Thwaites and Pine Glacier, you're looking at a very significant, very sudden sea level rise. That is absolute catastrophe. Unfortunately, we know it's going to happen, for sure. We just don't know when. And it may be 50 years, it may be 10 years, although less likely, but it also may be 150 years. What we do know, though, once it collapses, there will be catastrophic sea level rise, and it will take many hundreds of years before the ice forms again. 12,800 years ago, when this happened, it took 1,200 years for the sea levels to go back down. Now, knowing this, we need to prepare our businesses, our communities, our families, our governments to a world where sea levels are going to rise. And the Dutch are very good at that. I'm in Amsterdam now. Amsterdam is 5 meters below sea level. It's possible to protect some of the land, not all of it, but we need to prepare and decide what land we're going to protect with giant engineering projects, what land we're going to let go to sea, which we have to prepare so we don't poison the sea more than we already have. And also, we have to figure out how we're going to move people to higher ground because it's other people's land, right? This raises so many questions. This mass migration, how is it going to be handled? We need to start this conversation. And really, that was what my Antarctic trip was about. I almost lost my fingers to frostbite when I was there.
Oh my!
But you know, these things come at a price, personal price. I see it as growth. And you know, people who say that this is just a publicity stunt, I just laugh at them because I don't think anybody willingly would put themselves in that situation. You know, when you
try to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a young family, I have a big job running a big company. You know, I'm not going to. I put myself in discomfort to personally.
That's why in my introduction I said that you are a bit of a madman.
Yeah.
Let me just ask that. Have you been an athlete in your previous life? Because this takes an enormous amount of personal effort and commitment.
Yeah, I know I've always enjoyed sports, but I've never been a professional climber or a professional swimmer, runner. But I do have discipline, and I think with discipline and determination, you can prepare for anything.
This is a great message.
This is a different subject, but one of the things I realized when I was in Antarctica is I suffer from not having organized myself around sport from a very young age, because people who push themselves young, professionally or amateur, but it doesn't matter, in a very disciplined way, I think their body and their metabolism develops in a way which is much more suitable to extreme pressure like this. When you do it like I do later in life, even though you train very diligently, I train every day at 6 in the morning. I was taking daily cold plunges for 5 minutes at 4 degrees just to get used to the cold. It's not really enough. So there is that distinction. I think it's twice as hard for me than it is for a professional athlete to train for something like this.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, let me take you to your techno-optimism. Right now we are in an era that is characterized by the rise of artificial intelligence. This technology already changes a lot of stuff: political power, political orders, our economy, your business, the whole production chain. What are your hopes and your fears about this technology? And if you would put a number, do you have a pit doom? Have you seen this number? Possibility of doom through and with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, I am very well aware of the risks, and I do agree with some of them. Because our capitalist system allows for runaway development and then regulation after the fact, I think here we have a unique risk of doing a lot of damage. Ultimately, do I believe that AI will be the end of humanity? I don't. I think I think even if AI gets smarter than us, I do think we'll be able to create enough regulation and enough controls in time to prevent something like that. Now, in terms of efficiencies, the other risks, I mean, what worries me is, simply jobs. You will have to go to a universal income of some kind, because most jobs that I work with today will disappear. They are disappearing already. And, we have at least 140 use cases in BEKO where we're deploying AI. This makes us more efficient, cost efficient. We give better service and product to the customer as a result at a better price. But it comes with a cost, and that is
social
job.
cost.
Yeah, and that needs to be addressed. The second thing I worry about this more. I mean, you could argue that in terms of investments also, this changes everything. How you invest, because there is no way now we can determine what's real and what's not real. Now, this, of course, everybody focuses on the political implications, meaning how do I vote, right? I mean, we're living through a period where the next US president will probably be Trump. And, that has a lot of implications worldwide. I think as the pressures of climate change and migration grow, we will see an increasing polarization towards the right worldwide. But in an environment where you can't tell what's fake and what's real, it's very confusing for people and how they vote. That is the second biggest worry I have. And of course, this has investment implications. What am I going to believe? What am I going to base my investment decisions on, right? This needs to be addressed. But over time, I think we'll figure this one out too. It's just early days. So I am a net believer that it will drive efficiency and further growth. But when I said I'm a techno-optimist, I really leave AI aside. I think I'm much more in favor of looking at things which have immediate impact on decarbonization. So as, again, the capitalist system and the market system allocates resources and rewards at the moment at an increasing level for things like carbon capture, carbon scrubbing, hydrogen, mobile nuclear, I think we're going to see a faster shift and a decarbonizing future faster than we expect. Just like we've ramped it up faster, we will pull back faster. I mean, the impact won't change, but at least it will help maybe 2 generations, 3 generations later. Also, you look at the speed of electrification, electric vehicles. You can argue there's some good, there's some bad, but ultimately we need to clean up our act. I mean, just from a pollution perspective, right? So that conversion is also happening faster. And I think that will accelerate even further. So that's my optimism. My optimism is that, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that the whole discussion right now is very much polarized.
Yeah.
You have on the one hand those that believe that the whole capitalist system, and especially its neoliberal flavor, have failed, and it is driving us to the edge of the cliff. So they are advocating for degrowth. The other day I have had in my podcast Roger Hallam, who is the leader of Rebellion Extinction. Mm-hmm. He believes that we should revolt against the system in order to create grassroots level societies, in order to degrowth the economies and degrowth the political systems. So you have all these different agendas on the one end, and on the other end, you have people like Trump, you mentioned, that are deniers at the top of the ladder of climate change. And then you have sane people like you and me trying to do their best in order to find the middle solutions, the necessary actions, and logic discussions that are not there. You see my problem, and this is why actually I created this podcast, because I cannot have a logical conversation with people.
Yeah, I mean, Alexandros, you're so right. First of all, I know how to sell one more washing machine or refrigerator. I don't know how to manage a situation where I sell one less. So degrowth is very difficult for businesses to really adjust to. I mean, that's a different way of existence. It means you need to be able to make fewer more efficiently and sell it for more so that you can actually be sustainable and create enough capital for investing, innovation, sustainability, etc. That's something which the world doesn't really know how to do. However, I do believe we have to learn that. So this cycle of eternal growth is not something sustainable. I mean, and when you say the capitalist system has failed, I agree with that completely too. I mean, I go back to our, the economists who lived in ivory towers in universities, who designed their system, basically, our market-based system, but they forgot to attach a value to nature. When you don't have
forgot to see energy. We are energy blind.
Yeah, but when you don't attach a value to nature, you destroy nature because there's no opportunity cost to it, right? If you had valued each tree in the Amazon forest at a certain price, and cutting that would tax that price, you would see the Amazon forests where they should have been. So, I mean, we need to correct certain things, and carbon pricing is one of those methods. I'm a big believer in it. I was on the leadership council for it of the World Bank, but that's failed at the moment. I think going forward, it will happen again. I'm an optimist, right? I have to be an optimist.
And I want you to tell me how you think, because I have seen that you are really putting your bets on the blockchain technology. How is the blockchain is going to help this industry of carbon capture?
Yeah, I mean, I think blockchain will basically bring in the trust that's missing. If you look at decarbonizing and the cost of carbon, a carbon tax, we need to make sure that whatever emissions you are abating is actually the money is going to the right place, to the right project, and the execution of that is really there. And it's not this sort of mad free-for-all sort of, like the Western image of the United States in the 1800s. It's got to be organized, and there has to be trust built into everything. I think blockchain brings that. And I'm not talking just about carbon, supply chain, materials. How are you going to know the origin of materials? They go through so many different transshipments, companies, changes of origin. You want to be able to know exactly what you're getting. I mean, one of my favorite restaurants in London, I won't name it, so it's not advertising, but the meat you get, there's a QR code on it. And when you click the QR code, the farmer that grew the meat, that harvested the meat, tells you the story, where, how it was. I would love to see that kind of transparency. I have no idea what I'm eating when I buy it from a supermarket. No idea. And let me tell you, 90% of the time, it's really bad for you. So I think blockchain brings a solution to a lot of the problems. Identity, how you spend your money, taxes, really, I think it'll clean up a lot of the issues where trust is necessary.
Do you think that governments are going to accept it?
I think governments will have to accept it. I mean, in many places, it's difficult, right? Many politicians and governments are corrupt. So anything you bring in that cleans up a system sometimes is counterproductive for them. But I do believe that we will have, for example, I believe central banks will have their own digital currencies very soon, in the next 5 years, right? I mean, why would they let such an important space as digital currencies be not controlled by the government and the central bank? So I think they will embrace it. Yes.
Okay, let me take you to another subject. Some years ago, we've been saying that we are living through the most peaceful time in the history of recent civilization. Right now, we see war marching all around. It is surrounding Europe. It is marching in the Middle Africa. And right now, we are in the brink of having major confrontations between the US and China. So we're actually moved away from the peaceful times of the past. How does that affect your business and also your mindset as a business leader?
I mean, we have benefited as a generation. We're the luckiest generation alive ever. Yeah. We've benefited from 70 years of Pax Americana, right, with American dominance, and a peace dividend that came from that I don't think humanity's ever had before. Now, the geopolitical tensions spilling over, Russia, US, I mean, Russia, Ukraine, I call it Russia, US.
Exactly.
US, China. This is actually the result of...
Actually, it is the West vs the rest.
You can put it that way too, but I think it's it's more complicated. Why? As Pax Americana for 70 years, with a single pole, the world was easier to manage, right? Global trade was flourishing, globalization grew. The World Trade Organization actually succeeded in harmonizing so many things that the developing world started growing and people were pulled out of poverty. There were some negatives, but there were many, many, many benefits. And what we are seeing now is, I think, the emergence of China and going into a bipolar world, right? We will have two poles. And until that is firmly established, we're going to see destabilizing effects everywhere. When it's established and the balance is there, the sooner the better, by the way, I think we will be able to talk about global peace dividend again. But unfortunately, this is all happening at a time where the climate is going to kind of throw in a wrench. It's no longer just about power and sharing the power. It's also now happening when everything is actually decaying because of the climate. Meaning you'll have hot bulb moments, food supply will be changing, water levels will be rising, migration will be putting pressure. So there's so many destabilizing effects which are outside of geopolitics. I can't agree more that we're heading for very difficult times.
So what are we doing? You belong to the not 1%, 0.1% of the global population.
Yeah.
How does the people that you meet in your business life respond to these challenges, to these questions? What are the discussions that you are having?
I mean, unfortunately, everybody's aware of these things. For the business, at least, it's not just talking about it. I mean, you have to take action, right? We are actively reorganizing our manufacturing footprint to reflect a world where tariffs will be higher, non-tariff barriers will be higher. I mean, they will even use, things like we're talking about CBAM in Europe, which is a carbon tax at the border. effectively, it can be used as a tool to protect European industry. I mean, we're European. I'm not saying this against or for. I'm just saying protectionism is going to go up worldwide, and you really need to prepare your business for that. You need to have your factories in the right place. Supply chain resilience, we saw during COVID, is one of the most important things for business continuity. So we are investing very actively to diversify our supplier base. I mean, you saw that with the problem getting to chips, etc. And I think this trend is going to continue. You will have to make your business much more resilient, just like I had to be more resilient in Antarctica, right? Each blow you get is going to make you stronger, but you have to actively try and preempt that blow by getting ready in terms of supply chain, in terms of, again, decarbonizing, manufacturing footprint. Also, you need to remove complexity and cost from your business. I mean, if you're not cost competitive going forward, it will be very difficult. We talked about degrowth. That's coming. It's not just coming because of the environment. It's coming because of population collapse. I mean, China, in 2023, the population reduced by 2 million people. You extrapolate that, and you can see how big the problem is going to be. Simply, the customers...
The problem that Japan has right now.
Yeah, and I mean, Japan, by the way, you know, for 20 years, 30 years, went through stagflation, which was very difficult for them. And now they're coming out to a little bit of growth. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from Japan, but this is not Japan. This is like, we're looking at 20, 30, 40 Japans, right? Italy, I mean, just Italy, the average age over the next 20 years is going to go above 50. The population is going to drop by 10, 12 million in the next 10, 20 years. So where is the labor going to come from? You know, who's going to collect the olives or press the olive oil? I mean, I'm just using a metaphor.
Yes, and but in the same time, the developing world, especially Africa, Middle East, and Asia, is stabilizing. In the past, it was a growing population, but right now they are stabilizing too.
Yeah, I mean, I think there will still be population growth overall, but you see the population that consumes will be declining, and the population that doesn't consume will be growing. So in terms of economic activity, business, it's a big adjustment period. You need to be able to, it's going to be, you'll be managing much more capacity in a very different way. And that's an attitude adjustment, that's a leadership adjustment, that's really, you have to change the way you look at the world. And then personally, what you can do to prepare for this more complicated world is really change your consumption habits, you know, do your part, literally, as much as you can. And that's really all you can do. And then you prepare your family, you know, you invest wisely, you try and do your best to be a good citizen. You vote. It's incredibly important to vote in all of this because the governments are the ones that ultimately are going to make the biggest difference. So
do you believe, though, that our current politicians have the necessary ideas to meet these challenges? Because I started this podcast, I was telling to your colleagues earlier, because nobody here in Greece and all around Europe actually speaks about the important questions that we are talking about today.
Yeah, I do not think currently it's high enough on the agenda of governments and politicians. However, I do think as the situation gets worse and worse and worse, it will have to be. Politicians respond to people's concerns, right? And people's concerns, you know, when Greece goes through, God forbid, but it's going to happen, another cycle of terrible forest fires. And this,
or like in Thessaly with the floods this year.
I know, but you know, it's just going to get worse and worse. And then people will demand politicians pay attention because there's no other way of doing this, right? There's only one. If the UN operated the way it should have been, this would have been number one issue, and there would be a mandate, and you know, all of these promises made at COP would be tracked, the execution would be reported. Unfortunately, we're not in that world yet, but we will have to get there.
Secretary General tries his best.
Yeah.
He transmits the message. Nobody listens to him.
Nobody listens.
We're going from COP Saudi Arabia to COP Azerbaijan.
Yeah.
So what do you think that we can do, the rest of the business, the rest of the world can do against fossil fuel companies? Because they are a big part of the equation. And they seem that they have hijacked the whole discussion.
I wouldn't say they've managed to hijack it. I mean, they want to be part of the discussion, right? eventually, I mean, I believe that we still need fossil fuels for a period of time, and we can't just
cannot do
go
without
off them.
them.
So that it's good that they're part of the constructive dialogue. What's not good is if you look at the 1970s, 80s, for example, what companies like DuPont were doing in terms of depleting the ozone layer and the chemicals and how they fought that. We have experiences in the past how big corporates behave in the face of this kind of change. But I think today, fossil fuel executives understand that they have to change and they're investing in the right places. I don't think it's fast enough. And their governments and regulations have to come in, because without regulations, it's impossible to get a level playing field, right? When one person is doing it and the other isn't, or one country is doing it and the other isn't, you just create this unfair competing marketplace, which doesn't work. Now, how should the discussion go further? I don't know if COP is the right venue anymore. I do believe that what us as individuals, the single most important thing we can do is vote and make sure that politicians really have an action plan on how to decarbonize and how to adapt to a future that's coming. I mean, we need to be talking about giant engineering projects. For example, Istanbul, which was the capital of the world 1100 years, I've lived there many years, I'm from there, is one of the most important cities in the world, in my opinion, and one of the biggest.
This could be one of the most beautiful.
It is, and this could be protected if you were to build dikes like they have in Rotterdam or Amsterdam. It would take 30 years to build them, outside the Bosphorus, outside the Dardanelles. Then you could prevent the sea level rise swallowing the city. Or people just imagine, they say the city's on hills. But if you have the sewage systems, subways, electricity systems, roads, inundated, you can't live in that city. We need to talk about these engineering projects more. We need to hold our governments accountable to actually start investing in those projects, because we know it's going to happen. When you know something's going to happen, you cannot unknow it. This is a curse. Yes. So you have to think that way always. And that's what I try and do.
And you believe that we're going to come up with the necessary funds, because investing in these mega projects, while in the same time you're losing your your social base due to artificial intelligence and all these exponential technologies, who is going to pay the taxes?
It's going to be very difficult. I mean, two things you can't avoid: death and taxes.
True.
I think we're going to live in a period of extreme taxes going forward, and unfortunately, there's no other way. I will happily pay, by the way, if it's spent correctly. I think we need to start raising the money for it now, not later when it's too late. But I do retain hope, Alexandros. I want to leave with this message. I mean, because without hope, we don't try. And without trying, we're not going to get there. We all have a responsibility to do our best, even if it doesn't work. And there are many things that aren't going to work and are going to get much worse in terms of quality of life. There's going to be, horrific examples around the world of the consequences of what we've been doing and how we've been behaving. But that shouldn't stop us from doing our best to try and create a better world, to change behavior, to really lead by example. And that's all I will try and do. I'm writing a new book now, which hopefully will be interesting for people to read, about the sea level rise and why we cannot stop it. Because, every now and then you read a stupid idea like, oh, we can put a 2,000-kilometer curtain underwater to stop the hot. These things, it's nice to fantasize and think, but we need to be realistic so that then we start thinking about what we're going to do, how we're going to adapt. And I really want to start that conversation.
Great. So I know that the time is pressing you. You have a business to run, but please, let's finish with that. If you would have one advice to give to young persons today, to young people all around the globe, what would that be?
Young people are angry, and I fully understand, right? They didn't create this problem, but they will live the brunt of it. And this is totally unfair. And they're not even at the table. They are not at the table discussing solutions. They are not at the table being asked their opinion. And I think this is really a huge injustice. So what I would ask young people to do is vote. Get out there, make themselves counted. It's their future. They need to own it. And the best way to do that is vote, not just by voting for the government, but vote with your wallet. How you consume. Choose companies that give you the clean product and service. Really differentiate. Make this a number one choice in your life.
Excellent. Hakan, thank you very much for your time. Let's repeat our discussion whenever you have the time, whenever you have a nice message to transmit to the world. I'm waiting for your new book. And I also have to thank you because you agreed to send the book to one of our followers and readers here in the history of the Metacrisis.
Okay,
You're
great.
going to sign a book and give it to one of our viewers today. Thank you very much for that too.
Alexandros, it's my pleasure. And anytime, really, this is my passion, my purpose. And, the more people I can reach, the better. So thank you very much.
Thank
And
you
look
very
forward to
much
seeing you
too.
soon.
So this was my conversation with Hakan Bulgurlu, the CEO of BEKO, ascent, Hitachi, Grundig, and 10 more companies. He's a really inspired and inspiring individual, committed to the cause of sustainability, doing his best to create a new paradigm for the business community. And I really hope that he's going to make it, because his cause is our cause. Meeting the climate change challenge and coming up with the right solutions in due time, because the time window is closing fast, is one of the essential needs the Metacrisis puts to us in order to come up with the right solutions. If you like this podcast, please subscribe. Please click the button below my Patreon page and also to the YouTube channel and help us spread the word. Hakan, let me say also this, has agreed to sign a book of his own, his book on under the title A Mountain to Climb, where he speaks about his Everest conquest and about our common challenge in meeting the needs of climate change. He's going to send this book to the one who is going to make the most inspiring comment, share, or send some thoughtful or provocative question to the best comment that he is going to judge. That way, Hakan is actually helping the podcast going forward, pushing to the boundaries of the communities and transmitting the message wide, deep, and large. Thank you very much for being here at the History of the Metacrisis. See you next time.
The love of the sea has always been with me. One of my favorite places to go when I was younger was a beautiful beach in Thailand. If you were to ask me to describe what heaven looks like, that's what it looks like to me. And I took my children there to share that experience, and we rented a boat. There was massive excitement. We swam ashore, and unfortunately, it was knee-deep in plastic. Imagine decaying dead birds, stepping on syringes, no idea. And my daughter, who was 4 at the time, I had to grab her, and she just looked up at me and she said, "Why?" And I couldn't answer. I could not give her a reason for why that beach was in that state. And that was a real turning point for me. Running a big platform like Arçelik and being aware of our processes, the materials we use, I became increasingly concerned about how little was expected of you as a leader. I felt very uncomfortable about how everything was normalized. If you looked at the business's numbers, everything was great. But inside, I had a little storm brewing. I felt time was just passing. I was escaping the uncomfortable feeling by busying myself all the time and surrounding myself with people and things to do. I was numbing myself a little bit, maybe, like we all do. I had a good friend, David, who pulled me aside one day and said, "Look, I have never seen you alone, not even for a second." So I thought, obviously, there's something here. I need to face myself and stop patting myself on the back with other people's judgment of how good things are going and really decide what I need to do. What is it that'll make me happy and make me feel fulfilled? What could I do to make a difference? I had this fire burning inside me because I knew what was happening in terms of the climate, in terms of ecosystem destruction, but I was really struggling talking to people about sustainability. I had the audience, I had access to business leaders who would give me their time, but nothing would ever get through because sustainability is something abstract. You're talking about, unfortunately, labels like 2030, 2050. Everybody thinks it's someone else's problem. It makes it very difficult to get people to focus. I had thought about going to Everest, and it suddenly sparked this thing in my head saying, well, wait a minute, what if I combined Everest with sustainability to kind of raise awareness? Because Everest, everybody wants to hear. I could change my colleagues' attitude towards sustainability. We always had it as a vision statement in the company, but never really had it in the center of everything we do. If you'd asked me before I went, I would have said, this is just purely to get the sustainability message out, the awareness. It's just a tool. Of course I can climb Everest. You know, I can do anything. I read everything I could, talked to all the subject matter expert, hired the best organizer, trained more than I've ever trained. I did everything right. So I thought, if I've done all of that, I'm going to be better than all the others. I'm just going to get up there and get down, and it's done. Of course, you figure out very quickly when you get there it's not true. We're on a pass, 5,000 meters, and that's first sighting of Everest. Base camp looks like Mars to me, you know, it's just rocks and thin air, extremely cold at night, extremely hot during the day, so you're never comfortable and your body doesn't want to be there. The fact is that nothing lives there. You know, you leave some seeds or crumbs of bread on the ground, come back a week later, it's still there. And it kind of makes you think, what the hell am I doing here? We've now left base camp. We're in great spirits, having a lot of fun. My only worry is I'm gonna have to spoon with 2 Frenchmen up there, which isn't exactly my ideal situation for a holiday. But the views are incredible. I'm meditating, taking step after step. I'm in a good place, and I wanted to share it with you. After one day, all of us were bloodied completely in our airways. All of our feet were full of wounds. I mean, you could tell, you know, these super prepared, high ego, successful businessmen were not suited to the mountain. And every day, the mountain told us a little bit more of that. The death zone is above 7,000 meters, basically, where North Col is. And you have to climb this ice wall that looks like the winter wall in Game of Thrones. And at the top is this very thin strip of ice where you set up the tents. Very intimidating place. And from there, the amount of oxygen available to you is far less. Your body starts slowly deteriorating and consuming itself. And there's only a limited amount of time you can stay there. 4 days, 5 days max, but not longer. That's an altitude where if you sleep without oxygen, there's a very high likelihood you won't wake up. You just have to fight through the night with this drowning feeling the whole time. Lucas, one of the most celebrated and experienced organizers of high-altitude mountaineering at 7,000 meters, pulled me aside and said, look, from here on, you're on your own. If you can't walk, if something happens to you, you're staying on the mountain. Nobody's going to carry you down. You are on your own, you look after yourself. And that really sinks in, because until that moment, I thought I've hired the best organizers, I've really prepared myself. If I've done all of that, of course I'm not in danger. That scared me. It really scared me. And then seeing the dead bodies. One of the curses of high altitude is that you're completely preserved. You can see the faces, the expressions, and the contorted arms. When I started seeing all of this, I said, that's it, I'm going back. And the Austrian guide who was behind me said, you know, Hakan, I'm sorry, but it's much more dangerous to go back from here now because of the crowd behind us. The chances you slip or an accident happens are extremely high. The sheer level of exhaustion that's continuous kept forcing me to question myself and my decisions and why I was there. Every step I took, I became more aware of how futile this approach was and how unimportant my life was. At that altitude, you're seeing the curvature of Earth, you're seeing the deep blue of space, and you understand that your survival is completely dependent on nature. How crazy of humanity to think that we could battle nature and win. Who you are, what you've done, none of that matters. And the more I realized that, I think the more I changed as a person. The summit was euphoric for a moment. You know, it's the size of 2 ping pong tables. A few moments later, the Sherpas left and I was alone. I was looking down at the world. How on earth I was going to get down was beyond me. For me, the journey up was full of learnings. I was doing a lot of work on myself. All of that distracted me from the real danger for a while. On the way down, none of that was there. The feeling was overwhelming that I wanted to get back to my family, I wanted to get back to my children. If only I could get down alive. And when I got to advanced base camp, my feet were in pieces, you know, I was in horrific pain, but at least what I felt is relief. And what should have taken sort of 5-6 hours to walk down to base camp took me 12 hours. And those 12 hours, I think, were the most transformative in my life. I cried the whole way. One thing the Himalayas has is scale. Everything is huge and you are so small. And everything that you have worried about in your life up to that moment feels just pure stupidity. And you keep scolding yourself on how could you be so naive to think that those were the important things in life? How could I have missed these things? How could I have not told my father that I love him more? Or how could I have not really focused on my children when they came up to me and said, Dad, let's play. No, I have an email to send. No, I'm drinking my coffee. Later, never again. Because that kid is not going to ask you twice or 3 times. And then, of course, you get caught up in this, well, what was I thinking? What if something happened? What would happen to them? I mean, but I couldn't even call them. I couldn't. I was crying the whole time. That ego I had going up of this prepared person, I can do anything, was, thank God I'm alive. And I'm so grateful for nature to have allowed me to survive. When I got back, I was very, very different. I became obsessed with time. I had no time to waste. I have much less patience for PowerPoint presentations talking about how good we're doing things. I just want to hear about the problems and solve them. It sped the transformation of the company we manage into a purposeful business. And then, of course, everything changes because then everyone's aligned around the same goal and it brings success with it very, very quickly. Today, we have a business that is disrupting our industry because we're focusing so much on the environment and the climate and reducing emissions. What we were doing as humanity, making promises, but we were delaying implementing those promises. And the impact of delaying those promises every day made it more irreversible, the damage we're doing. Once you start seeing that, the sense of urgency, it overtakes everything else, because you know that if you don't do the right thing today, it's going to be too late to do it tomorrow. And therefore, you're faced with a moral choice. Will you be able to look your children in their eyes and say, oh, well, I didn't really realize and I was going with the bandwagon? Or do you want to say, I saw this coming and I did everything in my power to stop it from happening? I chose the latter one.